without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV Premier League show, match week 6. Can't believe we're already 6 weeks in. I am joined this week by my Monday night co-host of the American Scouser podcast that is live every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central for those of you that live in Chicago, or the guy that's in the other screen to the right. How are we doing tonight, Timucin?
Pretty good. Good sport weekend. Everybody I root for won, so we'll roll ahead, see how this next week shows up.
Yeah, that's how you know the difference between the way we rock and roll NFL teams. This guy gets to show up on Mondays in his team's hat because they're good. I wouldn't have showed up in that hat at all because I wear a Giants hat, which means his team beat the crap out of my team on Thursday night. So the last thing I would have been doing would have been showing up, reminding that or talking about it at all. So let's get right into the matches here in the Premier League this week. It was an eventful weekend, to say the least. We will get into a few of the matches, specifically the Arsenal-Tottenham match. We are going to kind of work on that as kind of our match of the week, kind of talk through about what happened in the match, why it worked or didn't for the managers, and more importantly, is it telling us a little bit about either team? Like, is this one match give you more insight into who Spurs are or who Arsenal are? But we'll get to that in a little bit. I wanted to start here. I think we should start with the last match of the week, because any neutral would look at this and probably be like, wait, am I looking at like a golf score that I put up on a card that I play? Or are we talking about like did Newcastle play Sheffield United in a bad baseball game this weekend? Like, how does the score end up 8-0 at this level? And I'm going to start with you from the defender standpoint, knowing you were a defender. How do those Sheffield guys show up and act like they didn't steal a paycheck this week?
See, this is what happens. This is why us defenders get a bad name, because you look at the score. The reason it becomes like this is defending is not only the guys in the back, it's kind of like a collective ordeal. What happens is, as the game gets out of control, in the beginning, everybody's on the same page, everybody's defending, taking care of their things. As the game gets out of hand, you kind of start losing it level by level. And you start from the fronts, then the midfield. And once you lose those, doesn't matter what the defenders do, you're going to like kind of lose control of the game, and it's going to get ugly because people stop tracking runs because the drive is not there anymore. I mean, yeah, it's a stretch to call this a match. It got ugly, fast and furious in some ways. And honestly, for Sheffield United, if I'm a Sheffield United fan, I would be very, very frustrated and worried because it's already going to be tough to get points. You kind of like blew a huge 3 points. Like we look at Everton this week, the 3 points you got, you look at the bottom of the league, nobody's getting anything. So at 3 points, regardless of which game it comes from, is like finding a gold mine. So Sheffield United blew that last week, and then you kind of come in, and now you really screwed your goal differential, which could come in very important at the end of the season. So I will be very, very worried about that.
And when I talked about the defending, I didn't even just mean just from defenders. I was pointing shots at you, but I meant it more like, listen, I understand there are days where it's a bad day at the office for everyone involved. And there are days where goals happen, things happen against the run of play. I mean, 2 Newcastle defenders score in the first half. They're lucky not to have a penalty as well in the first half. That was a clear penalty for me, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. If it isn't Anthony Gordon going down like a bag of bricks, and he actually was kicked across the shins, if it's anyone else, he probably gets that call. But because it's Anthony Gordon, he's probably getting a little bit less than, the match day officials, better judgment in that spot. He's not giving him the credit for the fact that it really was a foul. So I guess where I come from is at what point down 3-0, 4-0, at what point there does the manager, the captain, does someone pull everyone together and say, listen, to your point, we need to make sure we don't lose this 5, 6, 7, 8-0. It almost felt like at 4-0 they were relegated from the Premier League. It really almost felt like these guys didn't have an idea. And there's a lot of rumors that the manager's on the hot seat and that they're about to bring back Chris Wilder, the former manager who brought them up, which has got to be a weird situation for the existing manager, who's done a really nice job, to be honest, because he got them up last year against the grain. They weren't able to spend last year. They did it with all loan players. He got them up to the Premier League, and they've done absolutely no spending outside of bringing in Cam Archer. I mean, heck, they sold their best player last year in Diaby to Marseille. Yeah. I mean, if you sell your goal scorer, what can you expect other than just an absolute train wreck of a year? And I do feel for them, honestly. They seem like they're good supporters. I don't know exactly what the tragedy was, but I know they went through a real tragedy as a club in the last week or two. So maybe that had something to do with it. But just what an embarrassment. I mean, to be at this level and to get beat 8-0 just seems like it's not supposed to happen. I mean, maybe I'm overstepping or overstating things, but they made
I think it goes back to what you're saying, though. Those Chris Wilder rumors started like 2-3 weeks ago. Like he was at one of the games and stuff like that. So that can't be helping. And that doesn't help the coach say, hey, guys, this is what we got to do. At one point, you got to go into a damage control mode and say, okay, this is where we got to stop the leak. We're not going to come back. This game is gone, but stop the leak. And I think, somebody has to do that. Somebody has to take the leadership and do that. And there are games like that where, everything a team touches turns into gold and everything, the other team touches is shit. And it's not FIFA. You can't rage quit. So you got to suck it up and play through it. But that's when somebody has to say, hey, I don't care what we got to do. We're not conceding anymore. 5 is enough or 4 is enough. Whenever you felt it was enough. And I think you have to get everybody, like I say, usually what happens is, I hate to say it and pick on like the forwards, and then it starts from the front and level by level, the aggression, the work rate stops. And once that work rate stops, I mean, especially against a good team like Newcastle too. And, here's another thing, like Newcastle really didn't have any mercy. And they did not show any mercy, and they kept going at it. Sometimes you'll see teams like, you know what, let's just pass the ball around. This game is over kind of a thing, especially being away. They kept going at it. They wanted more, and heck, they sure got it.
Well, speaking of rage quitting, and if there was the equivalent of rage quitting in the Premier League, it would probably come from those in London, somewhere dressed in blue and white. Chelsea supporters show up again to an absolutely nothing burger performance from their side. They're their $1 billion side with 45 senior players that still can't put a player on the bench that I know how to spell their last name because I've seen them play. And somehow there's still spot for Conor Gallagher in the starting 11, and he wears the captain's armband for the club. If Conor Gallagher is your captain at your football club, I do not know what is like. I can't even with these people. Like you almost can't make it up each week. So, does this speak more to Chelsea's malaise, or would it be wrong for us not to give Villa a little credit here for going on the road to, what was at one time a big club to go play on the road in a tough atmosphere? I mean, a place Liverpool couldn't secure all 3 points at this so far this season, right? Yeah. Villa goes there, good game plan, keeps it tight, really created nothing. Chelsea gets the red card, Gusto sent off, and then, Villa gets the goal late through Watkins. Is this more about Villa and Unai Emery, or is this more about Chelsea's malaise and maybe, that Pochettino was not the right hire or the right fit for these players? Where does the rule come down on this one?
I think it's Chelsea. I mean, here's the thing: you're going into like the difference. I think is if Liverpool, for example, goes to Chelsea now. In the beginning, I mean, I said this prior to the season, thinking this is the best time to play him. Like eventually Pochettino will figure it out, find the starting 11. Before they find it, this is the best time. Well, now we know this actually is the best time, like the 5th, 6th week, where they're struggling, have even more injuries, and there is a lot of frustration going on in the club. I think if we play him now, we beat him, as opposed to playing in the first week where we didn't even know. Everybody was like, what is Chelsea going to be? I mean, making another FIFA analogy, Chelsea is like the team where sometimes you play these teams. New FIFA is coming out, so like if you're into FIFA, everybody should be in the mode. I mean, it's, like you bought a bunch of packs and built a really good team with the ultimate team, but you just suck. So you're still losing despite having that good players. That's what it reminds me of. And Pochettino, I don't know if it's his fault. I feel like Pochettino is the guy, like he's the chef. He's trying to make. I was talking about this in like the podcast last week. Like he's the chef. He's got the ingredients. He's making a dish over there, and the owner comes in and starts throwing like new ingredients at him that he didn't probably even want or don't even fit. They're like, this is not supposed to be spicy. I don't want that and stuff like that. And I think it's just messing things up even more. Will Pochettino be able to tell the ownership, stop, listen to me, this is what we gotta do? Or I don't see that personally. I think the latter is going to happen, where he's going to be the one that's going to be gone. Because let's face it, if this team does not make Champions League, there is going to be some serious financial issues coming up.
I mean, I look at this side right now and I think to myself, I can't imagine under any circumstance that there could be a Champions League. Like
when you look at the top of the league and the teams that they have to do better than, and that they're already behind like 9 points and stuff. So it's really tough.
Yeah, I just look at it. And it's just when you look at the sheer set of the fixtures and how they stack up with teams, like they can't score. And if you can't score goals in this Premier League, in a league where clean sheets are down, Chelsea's the only team that teams are keeping clean sheets against. Like there's almost no clean sheets in the Premier League. And the clean sheets that we are getting are coming from them. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. I do think that they're in real trouble. The ownership says they're going to stick with this manager and they want to give him time. And I'd like to believe that to be the case. I just don't know that they're going to have the patience or with the wherewithal to be able to stick through it. Yeah, and I think we've heard it so many times before. So talking about managers and probably two of the more influential managers on their sides, especially this season and over the last few seasons, obviously being Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, love him or hate him. He's done a good job building a squad and he's created a new culture there. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the man's last name, so we're just going to call him Big Ange on this podcast. As you can tell, I like nicknames. So the Australian comes in, not as much pedigree as maybe some would have expected. Really, really successful time at Celtic, played a good brand of football. He's got a big personality to go along with his big frame. You can tell he carries himself. He kind of talks to reporters like they're friends, but then also like gets under their skin at the same time. So it's almost like that kind of in your face, but buddy, a lot of those. So I think it's going to be interesting for him. They're clearly already in love with him as far as the results go. He's getting a lot out of the team. 2-2 draw. Arsenal has the lead twice. Playing at home. Is this more about Arsenal giving away the match or Spurs trying to remove the Spursy label maybe that's followed them for so many years with a performance like that coming back twice on the road against their big rivals?
I think it says a bit about both, not to cop out of that. But I think for Spurs, it says they are pretty darn close, and this is not just a fluke, like their start to the season. For Arsenal, I think it says that they still have ways to go before they can kind of keep up with the pace of City. And they are sometimes their worst enemy. And now injuries are piling up too. So it's going to be interesting to see, since you like nicknames, Lego Head, as I like to call Arteta on our Wednesday night show, let's see how he handles that, especially with the Champions League starting and stuff like that. But I think this game was a game that Arsenal really gave away and should have won. I mean, you just look at the second goal alone, right? It's just like the overconfidence, losing the ball, and you just like giving it away. And, they had the chances. They control, like Arsenal is a solid team, and they're kind of like fun to watch, the way they control, the way they move the ball around. I mean, Odegaard, we talked about it, I think in the, Discord channel, we had a chat about him, that he's a very fun player to watch as a neutral. And it's kind of like a guy he has become a guy that's like hard to dislike, even though when he plays for a rival, kind of a deal. So they play good football, but I think they're just going to have these issues where they shoot themselves in the foot. And sometimes you can make those mistakes, but you got to recover and find a way to still win. And they just can't do that yet. But for Spurs, I think this is a huge point from them. This is more of a statement from them. I think at the end of this game, the Spurs fans will be a lot happier because they were not expected to be in the stage, whereas Arsenal is expecting to be in the same breath as City.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we talked about that a lot last year, right, on all the different pods where, I think I kept saying, Arsenal they'll fold like a cheap suit. It's going to happen. And by the end of the year, it did, but it was well past when I expected it to happen. They hung around a lot longer. I think that was more of a blip. That was more of a blip than this was, in my opinion. I think they are further from City than their performances showed last year. And I think that they're starting to realize that. And I think European football is going to help them realize that even more. They had the luxury last year of only worrying about the domestic league and really only playing in Europa, but not really, and going out early in it. I think that helped them. I think having the extra Champions League football is already showing that it's taxing their squad a bit. They've got injuries with Martinelli. Gabriel Jesus never stays healthy. What did you make of the Declan Rice off at the half? Some are saying it was an injury. Arteta claimed it was tactical. Now, that could be showmanship. That could be maybe keeping him in line. It didn't make sense to me. If you're going to take him off to bring on Jorginho,
yeah,
and then he made a second substitution at the same time that made it almost seem like it was an attacking-minded substitution. To me, it felt like he must have felt something and they were just too nervous to lose him. But that seems like a big match to take your big money signing off. Someone who, so far this year, to me, has looked like he fit the entire side like a glove.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere, a quote from Arteta saying like that, Declan wanted out. Like he could not keep going. Like he was kind of forcing it, but he could not keep going.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
But then I think they said initially a hip, but I think he had his calf wrap. That could be one of those. That's sore too. You're sitting anyway. Let's ice that thing, kind of a deal. But you would think it had to be, right. It's not the game to, leading at your, expensive signing who's done well so far. So that just, and looking at the game, it's not like you were like, you got to take this guy out or something like that either. So I'm assuming, there was some injury. There are like other injuries they have too. It's kind of like starting to pile up. Saka is not feeling like 100% now and stuff like that. The European thing is kind of like a mystery to me. So we'll see what the Champions League does to them. I felt like last year when they had Europa, my thought was, once these Thursday games start getting more difficult, that's when they're going to struggle and City is going to catch up and get past them. Well, they got eliminated early on Thursday night, so they never got to those really tough games that I thought they were going to get to. And I feel like that hurt them more because it's something like I was talking about actually, I think this morning. Like you're driving If there's a guy behind you, you're looking ahead to what you're doing, and then you look behind. It's one thing. When that Europa games disappeared, and all they had was the Premier League games, I felt like they were just driving, just looking at the rearview mirror and seeing where City was. And I think that affected their performances. Sometimes when you play every 3 days, every 4 days, you don't have time to think. You just play. And it kind of builds momentum. If you keep winning, it just becomes habit. You just keep winning. A game like this, you find a way to win at the end because, that's what you do. It's just like the mentality that comes with. You score in the 93rd, you score in the 85th, where you find a way to win if it is ugly. I felt like last year when they lost the Europe games, that just disappeared. The momentum disappeared, and they were only worried and thinking of one game, and this was a team who had never been there. So that pressure, I feel like, got the best of them. Now it's Wednesday games, but it is Champions League. So obviously it's going to be tougher competition. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that, because you can't really rotate and, do what, for example, Liverpool is doing with the Europa, getting minutes to the guys who don't normally get minutes. So you can't really afford to do that in the Champions League as much. And as these injuries pile up, they're probably looking at this next international break and hoping they can get there with minimum damage at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And, if we had a little more time, I'd go into the whole Gary Neville comments about thinking that Arsenal over-celebrated the second goal and that Saka went too far by doing the James Maddison, arrow point to the crowd. And that basically Arsenal looked like they were still celebrating on the pitch when the ball got kicked back in. And then less than a minute later, they turn off. Saka lets the player in, who then slips Son in, and Son does what he does, right? Son just finishes and scores goals. I'd also, maybe we'll get to this next week, or I'll ask Bickler next time I have him on. I'd love to hear your take at some point down the road. We got a couple things to talk about here as we wrap up in the last 10 minutes, but what your thoughts are on replacing a goalkeeper who has basically been your number one since the day he signed. And now that he's not there anymore, you have started to leak and concede goals, even though you may have the better of the two goalkeepers as your number one. I'm not sure that the center backs who, like Aaron Ramsdale and been playing with Aaron Ramsdale, feel the same way after just 4 weeks of David Raya being in camp. So it's great to know that Fabrizio Romano works for his PR people and is saying all the right things for David Raya, which means David Raya dropped some coin his way. But it would be nice to really get a little truth serum, and it'll be interesting in January to see if Ramsdale tries to find himself a new club with the Euros coming up at the end of the season, and him
they
wanting
showed
to be
him,
part.
like, he had a huge save. They showed Ramsdale. He was applauding it too. He's playing the role because he knows there's probably a camera on him 24/7 every time something happens in goal. It is an odd situation. I do agree. And yeah, that's a long chat by itself, because I feel like it's odd, and I don't know if I will like it on my team, because it's not like you had a scrub that was just, you didn't have an intern and you brought like a really goalie. You went out and got this guy initially. So why replace him now is odd to me. But yeah.
Yeah, everyone questioned it when they bought the player, and then I feel like he earned everyone's respect, including all the supporters who questioned him. And half of England was saying he should be our number one. And then you go out and get, who could arguably be Spain's number one, who's probably really pissed he's on loan at Arsenal and not on loan at Real Madrid. If he had just known Courtois was going to blow his knee out, he probably would have stuck around Brentford a little longer, and he'd be at Real Madrid right now. But Manchester City, Liverpool, Brighton, Tottenham, Arsenal, top five. Always nice to see those 5 green check marks running across the top for Liverpool and City. Would be nice to see a little red on City at some point. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Other than maybe United jumping and Newcastle both jumping into the top 5 or top 10 with their big wins, do you believe Brighton has a legitimate shot playing in European football to actually maintain and continue to fight for a top 4 spot? Or at some point, will the size of their squad, the size of the task of trying to be up every Thursday night for what their fans will demand them to give them good performances in, especially seeing how they played against AEK Athens?
Yeah.
Do you feel like maybe they should focus on the league, or they just can't afford to do that in their first ever time in Europe, and they need to just kind of wade through this, and maybe the best thing for them might be qualifying for Europa again, or even the Europa Conference, and trying to win their way into a bigger competition rather than finish top 4.
The tough thing for Brighton is they're in a really tough group. Like for Europa, that is a really, really tough group that they're in. This was on paper probably their easiest game that they lost at home.
Scary.
So yeah, so that's kind of concerning. But I don't know. You can kind of put that on maybe the pressure of first European night, kind of an ordeal, and maybe like the nerves kicking in. I think it's not a fluke. The way they play, and they will keep playing it regardless of the results. I think that's what it is. So they're going to come out to the next game. They're going to play the same way. I really do feel they're going to stick around. I mean, with the 5th going into Champions League as well this year, right? I feel like they will get a spot for themselves and they will make it up there. Because you got to figure, we're talking about Newcastle, and I mean, you see their check marks and X's over there. And speaking of tough groups, and they're in the Champions League. So they're going to be battling with that. We know the mess that United is in. So not a lot of teams to be able to challenge and do it consistently, I think. We say Villa is good. We say West Ham is good. But are they really that good to be able to consistently challenge them? If anybody, I can see maybe Villa kind of keeping this up down the road. I feel like West Ham is doing what they do, kind of like stuck up on some points early so they can suck and focus on Europe afterwards, kind of an ordeal. But yeah, I think Brighton is going to be there. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I really enjoy watching them play the game. The game itself is a beautiful game to watch, the way they play it. But I think they're going to stick around and earn themselves a Champions League spot this year.
It would be amazing story for everyone on the South Coast and at the Amex Stadium. Tony Bloom, the entire board, they all deserve credit. They were like, I mean, I know you can watch the documentary. They were like minutes away a decade ago from being out of the football league completely. They played at a stadium where they used to fold up the chairs and send them to the Scottish Open for golf tournaments, and then would get the chairs for the stadium back in the offseason and have to repaint them and repurpose them. Like, it was a track stadium. It had a big oval track in the middle, and it was just trash from what people say. And to think they play in like a really, really top level, like football only pitch over in England on the South Coast, really making people enjoy their football. I think they're the envy of all of European football when it comes to buying low price players and selling them at a high. They've brought through multiple managers now, and they might have the best one they've ever had now. And it's like every time they lose a player, they bring up a player who's better. They lost Trossard, and I said, man, how do you replace that guy? They introduced Matoma, and I think Arsenal wishes they bought Matoma. Yep. I mean, it's like, this is how they roll. And I expect them to do the same with the guy that replaces Caicedo. I expect them to do the same with probably the guy that replaced Matt Callister. Like, it's not nostalgic.
I mean, yeah, if you look at it, they lost their core midfield in the offseason. How many times have we seen teams do really well and finish well above expectations, and then they lose a bunch of people to the big boys in the summer, and they're fighting for relegation the next year? These guys have somehow made boatloads of money and have gotten better somehow.
Yeah, and the year before that, they lost Basuma, and everyone said, oh, how do you replace this guy? And they were like, we got this McAllister guy. How do we replace this guy? It's just unbelievable what they do. So we talk about all that good green arrows and checks. Woo, there's not much green on this page. We're looking at the bottom half of the table here, and literally they have 7 total wins out of 10 sides through 6 matches. 60 results.
Crazy.
7 wins. And 2 of those are Forest. And one of them's Chelsea. That's just and one's Everton. That's even crazier than the others. Yep. When you start looking at this and you start talking about relegation areas, I think for me, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. I never in a million years thought there would be a team worse than Luton in the league all year long. Sheffield might just be that. And performances like they did against Newcastle make me think they're probably not going to get off that rooted rock bottom position, maybe all season long. I still have this feeling that Burnley will get a few results right here and there because I think they play a little better football. I think they're a little better managed and just have a slightly better talented player. Are Everton, Wolves, and Bournemouth just looking to get to like 20, 25 points? Like, is that where we're aiming? Someone's just got to get to 25, 28 points. Because I don't see these teams all getting to 40 points or anywhere close.
Why, like, getting a win is huge. I mean, you look at that. So there's like 2 greens in the last, like, 5 or 6. And that's freaking huge. They're like, we won. It's like winning the league. I mean, you're almost guaranteeing it. We're like, all we need is 2 more wins rest of the year kind of a thing is what it looks like when you look at this. And that's the thing. I mean, here's the deal. Last year, probably when we looked at this and even later in the season, it looked like Forest was never going to make it, right? But at least we said, I mean, they have like 35 new guys. Are they going to be able to figure out how to play them and stuff? I just don't even see that scenario for Sheffield and Luton Town and stuff like that. And by January, I think it will be too late to do that. Burnley, I do agree with you. It just becomes a matter of, are they going to be able to get enough wins? Because the draws are not going to get you far. You need a win to, I mean, look at where Everton is now with 1 win. I thought that was probably, in terms of impact, that was probably the biggest score of this week, both for Bournemouth and Everton, for Everton to pull that out. First of all, Everton scoring 3 goals in 1 game probably has not happened in like freaking 3 years. So
I mean, Brentford's got to be kicking themselves. How do you let Everton walk in and beat you like that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you let that happen? I mean, it's an embarrassment. I think in Bournemouth's case, Bournemouth has looked better as a footballing side. They don't look any better than the team that Gary O'Neill kept up last year. And to me, like, you needed a grinder type guy at Bournemouth. They went out and got a footballing manager. It's like you might have got a guy who plays beautiful football, is going to finish 18th and then get a shot to try to win the championship next year. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense. It'll be interesting. Would I love to see Chelsea get pulled into this? I absolutely would. Would it be fun to see Everton and Wolves drop down there and have 6, 7 teams? I think at the end of the day, it's going to end up coming down to about Wolves, Bournemouth, probably Burnley, fighting for 1 spot. For whatever reason, I still feel like the combination of Decore, Beto, eventually Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and just a little bit of that nostalgia, I think will help Everton see him across the line. I feel like they 2 or 3 times a year get a result like Saturday, get a result like 2 years ago where they scored 2 goals and they beat Arsenal. And you're like, how the hell did that happen? Or they score 5 against Brighton at Brighton, and you're like, that just saved their season. So I still feel like Wolves, Bournemouth, and Burnley probably fight for that 1 spot, but Luton's in real trouble. Speaking of a guy in real trouble, we are going to get on this topic, if I did the slide properly. We're going to touch on this quickly because we do have to wrap up and get ready here for our next show that comes up in a few minutes. I will say this and raise my hand. I believe Morgan Gibbs-White might be one of the new, great instigators in the league. He gets under people's skin. He's got a lot of Jesse Lingard in him. He almost, he looks like whatever the guy from the Addams Family was. Like, he looks angry. He looks confused. He looks like he's trying to steal your wife, your girlfriend, whatever. And honestly, at first I was like, it's nothing. When they slow down and you see this image here on the right, you see that Rodri truly loses red, reaches up and puts his hands out. Now, I will say this. There's another image, and you got to find it, where Rodri basically has his hand like this, and I swear to God, his hand is about 1.5 feet long. Like, he might have the largest hands in the history of strangleholds, because that's like Andre the Giant going around Hulk Hogan's neck right there.
He's holding like a Houston.
he actually looks like he has got his finger on Phil Foden's chest. Like, I'm holding him by the neck and pointing at you. He had to get sent off for this, right? Gibbs-White does throw himself to the ground and doesn't cover himself in glory with the way he responds to the chokehold. And he did put his head to his forehead, but this isn't just my unbridled bias against City, right? And knowing that Rodri is the most influential player in their side overall, probably on a 90-minute match.
Yeah.
and they're going to lose him for Newcastle in the league or Newcastle in the League Cup midweek, and they'll lose him for Arsenal away. So they're going to lose him for their first Big Six real clash. 2 questions. Is Pep angry with Rodri for the actions? Will he blame someone else? Which I'm sure we know the answer is he will blame someone else. That's what Pep Guardiola does. And how does he get around it? Can he honestly just roll out Calvin Phillips, or does he really have to rebuild things? Like, how big of a loss is Rodri against Newcastle in the League Cup, and more importantly, Arsenal in the Premier League?
Yeah, it's a huge loss. I don't even understand what the heck happened here. Because initially when I saw it at real time, like, like full speed, you're like, holy cow, he made a meal out of a touch is what it looked like. And he just flew off just because he touched him on the shoulder. Then you see, like what you see on the right-hand side there, you're like, holy cow, that's a red, and then some. It's almost like Anthony Taylor's like, well, nothing I can do over here. It's a red. I mean, you're like choking the dude. Why is, and it goes back to what you're saying, he must have been under his skin the entire game. Because this is literally the beginning, right, of the second half.
Yeah.
So there's nothing going. So it's not even like, oh, you just hit me like 2 minutes ago. I'm still mad. Like, it's nothing like that. So this must have been built up maybe even before, like games before. I just did not understand the reaction. Regardless of what Pep says to the public, behind the scenes, he would be mad at Rodri. Obviously, for the reasons you're saying, the games he's going to miss that are crucial. They will find a way. I think they will put Calvin Phillips there, Nunez. Maybe they'll like utilize him in that role because he can play defensive if need be. He will find a way, but it's a makeshift way, and you can't replace perhaps one of the, if not the best center, defensive midfielder. So you're gonna find a way to get close. You're never going to be able to replace, because he's influential in terms of what he does and how he protects the guys behind him. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure Pep behind the scenes says, what the hell are you thinking? Because that looked like a ridiculous overreaction.
Yeah, I just made no sense to me. And honestly, if all it was that little niggle on the side of the pitch, there was nothing in it either to warrant putting your hands on another man's throat. Yeah. Like, when you know that it could easily give you, he went in for the headbutt. He went back in a second time. Yeah. And I kept saying to myself, what got said after the second head that made the man see mist? Like, what made the red mist come down? Because it felt like it went from, in the old, Anchorman line, like, this has escalated quickly. Like, it felt like this escalated quickly, like, right?
By the corner thing, like, there's nothing going on. It's not even a hard challenge. Like, you're trying to injure me. Nothing.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff happens 100 times a game, like even a late nudge and stuff. So, yeah, that was a weird.
I will say, City obviously has the reinforcements with Nunez. I thought he looked very bright and you can see the qualities that other clubs saw in him playing at Wolves by playing in a side that was a better side, because he looked a better player, in my opinion, in that powder blue on Saturday. What I will say is if Stones were healthy, I could see Pep deploying Stones in the 6 and just playing him a little deeper, because he's done that in the past. I really feel like he's going to struggle with giving Calvin Phillips a start at Arsenal. I do think he'll start in the League Cup, but I think he probably would have started in the League Cup maybe anyways against Newcastle. We never know. But that'll be interesting. So let's get out on this quickly. Next week, I think there's some really good matchups. Aston Villa versus Brighton, the lunchtime kickoff game, could be a lot of fun. Obviously, for me, I think that, Fulham Chelsea will be interesting Monday afternoon. To think Chelsea supporters have to wait all the way till Monday to find out whether or not their team's not going to score this weekend. At least it won't ruin your weekend, Chelsea supporters. But I don't think there's any question here. The match of the week has to be the resurgent Tottenham in third place coming up against, Liverpool on a perfect record, 5 wins and 1 draw on the road at Tottenham. Real quick, knowing you're a Liverpool supporter, what is your just gut about that match? Does Liverpool keep the victory streak going, or is this where maybe getting on the road at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, getting out of there with a draw against a team that's kind of firing would be a good result? Not a very good result, but would be a good result.
I see this as a very like a high scoring game because both managers are not going to give in from the way they play. I think it boils down to who is going to be clinical. I think both of them. We know the Liverpool defense, and we see how loosely Tottenham plays defense. So it's just a matter of the front line and how clinical they are. And the goals there will be a lot of goals. I think it's just a matter of like, can the teams finish when they get their opportunities? Because I think there will be a lot of countering opportunities on both sides. It's a good test for both teams. I think it's the best test for like the biggest test probably for especially Liverpool for that midfield that we are kind of like happy about. So I'm optimistic, but I'll be honest, like if it ends up with a draw, I don't take that as a bad result either.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to stay optimistic. We're going to talk about it, I'm sure, during our podcast this week. And with that, I'm going to just remind everyone, please, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, give it, and you haven't subscribed to us before, please give it a subscription. Don't forget, if you subscribe between now and the 30th of September, you will get entered in for a chance at a fabulous Liverpool home jersey that we will be rallying or auctioning or we will be raffling off to a random person who joined this month. So once again, please like, share, subscribe. As always, thank you for watching the Premier League show. It's been a lot of fun. Timucin, we will get out on this. Have a great week, and thanks for sitting in.